Become your own best advocate. Join a program that you're actually learning how to self-heal. So you've just been diagnosed and you're feeling relief. You can finally label all your pain and your grief. You're wondering what's wrong. Now you finally can know. It's no longer a mystery why these symptoms won't go. But what you do from here will make the greatest impact. Spiral down further or set you on the right path. When you're stuck on a label, life can throw you for a loop. You'll grow tired of a system that keeps you from the truth. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever it is that you are on this planet. Welcome to episode 18 of Trigger Proof. We've made it here, episode 18. This is a new studio, completely different location. I'm on location in Victoria, beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and I am delighted to be here. This show is dedicated to people who want to take responsibility for emotional regulation so that they can become better leaders, better parents, better friends, and better humans. Essentially, trigger proof does not mean trigger less. And in my 18 years as a chiropractor, helping people primarily with stress-related disorders, I saw again and again and again patients coming to me with physical aches, with absolute organic problems with digestion, with hormonal issues, with depression, with anxiety. And it just seemed that as my career kept developing into this body work that I do, helping people with help their nervous system, I started noticing that the root cause of why they were getting into trouble in the first place was stress and trauma, an inability to adapt. So over time, my career took me upstream to help people with the thing that stressed them out the most, which often was breakdowns in relationship dynamics, whether it be romantic relationship, friend, family, primary caregiver. And these conflicts that are left unresolved get stored as trauma in the body and wreak havoc on our nervous systems, our health, our business, our relationships, and you name it. So over time, I gave myself permission to keep going upstream. And as I kept going upstream in my own life to figure out the root cause of my challenges, I discovered there was a singularity. There was one cause, one cure, which was an inability to perceive and know who you are with respect to the universe. In other words, what's my purpose? Do I love myself? Why am I here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? And these questions, this inquiry that we all as human beings need to face sometime or other, seems to be the one conflict that has a tendency, when unresolved, to create havoc in our relationships because we don't have a context for why we're here, what this relationship is about, and then it goes downstream and creates health problems. So by the time you enter a doctor's office and you get a diagnosis, chances are you have been dealing with a conflict that was unresolved for weeks, months, or years. And this discovery again and again, when some people would heal and some people wouldn't from their diagnosis, led me to this frustration and calling within me to actually become a teacher, because the word doctor actually means teacher. And how often do we go to the doctor and we're actually taught about the unresolved challenges and the lifestyle habits that we've gone through that are contributing to the problem? Often you're given a diagnosis, you are labeled with something, and most often you're leaving that office with a prescription pad, and you're staying and managed under that problem for years. In fact, it is well known that if by the time you're diagnosed and you stay within that medical system, but from the time of diagnosis, if you don't leave that system and find answers for yourself, every year you're going to cost the system more money, and by staying within the confines of the medical healthcare system, you will oftentimes get sicker and sicker. And today we're going to be talking about how to break out of that cycle, how to transcend the label and get to a place of healing. This whole show, this entire reason why I'm here, is to cover the topic of healing. And it really became apparent to me when I was in my 6th or 7th year in my chiropractic practice, and I was starting to do talks in my office, and this woman came in, and she was a guest of one of my patients who was dealing with fibromyalgia, osteoporosis, thyroid problems, depression, digestive problems, chronic pain. She had a list of symptoms like this and a list of medications that she was taking for each symptom like this. And she came to one of my talks, and I shared many of the concepts that I'm about to share with you today. And at that moment, she decided, I'm going to sign up for chiropractic care. I'm going to come and see this guy. What he's saying makes sense to me. Because after all, she's a retired nurse. So she's very well acquainted with the entire medical system and the way that it worked. And as we started continuing with our chiropractic care, which is all a big part of nervous system regulation, what we discovered was she would come to my advanced workshops on mindset and healing and transformation and changing her story. And little by little, within 3 months, her list of medications went from here to here. Now, one of the things that she was doing that was really interesting was that she was attending a fibromyalgia support group. And she was every day going in there each week, and reaffirming her identity as a patient, as a sufferer of fibromyalgia. And what she noticed after coming to see me and being engaged in a completely different conversation was that she went back after a few months and noticed, wow, everybody was still exactly as they were having the exact same conversations. And in this case, and what happens is, in this situation where she had been coming to see me and having a completely different conversation, and the conversation was on what's working, what's getting better, what's possible for her in the future, what alternatives there are for her to take these pills and start doing active lifestyle modifications. And over a period of 3 months, she went back there and saw everybody was still at the same level of the diagnosis. And in her situation, she had cut down within 3 months her medication by 75%. And it was like a breakthrough for her, that it's all about the conversation, the stories that you keep repeating, and the diagnosis oftentimes becomes our identity. Now, to help illustrate this point, I'm going to invite somebody who has had almost 30 years of medical experience working with patients in a doctor's office and a neuroscience degree, and a sufferer himself of generalized anxiety disorder, so that he actually went on a search to find root causes and answers. And we basically last year met by chance on the internet. It wasn't a mandate or anything like that, but it turned out to be a bromance. And we became great friends, and it just seems like we have been living parallel lives up until now, because the same conclusions in my 18 years of a chiropractic practice was same as his in 3 decades in his medical practice. I'd like to welcome once again my good friend.
I'm not the bad guy. I'm not a bad guy. I'm a medical doctor, but I'm not.
What's funny? You know what's funny is I spent the majority of my career bashing medical doctors.
I know, we've talked about this.
Because I was so hurt because of all of the times where my patients would go to their doctor and their doctor would say, don't go see the chiropractor because you have osteoarthritis. There was a label and a diagnosis. Right. You have osteoarthritis and osteoporosis. What's a chiropractor going to do to fix you? And so there was this great deal of resentment. So you were the bad guy in my life for a long time, but right now, how could you be a bad guy? You're so lovable.
I know. Who doesn't love Dr. Russ, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it is one of those things that diagnosis from a medical standpoint is what we do. Like from the time we go in medical school, it's basically we're converging down to a diagnosis because we feel that if we get that reductionist diagnosis, we can treat something.
And by the way, and another thing, I'm just going to interrupt you. Isn't it true that in your school, you get extra points for the diagnosis? So the win becomes, yes, I got the diagnosis correct, but it still leaves the patient kind of like, okay, so now what do I do to help heal this? Because it's really diagnosis focused rather than healing.
It is, yeah. I don't know if it's that Grey's Anatomy, like, yay, I got the diagnosis or whatever it was, and ironically, I when I graduated, I won the internal medicine award for the class for knowing the most diagnoses. So it's kind of like, and then I saw the light, thank you, Lord, about how allowing people to heal themselves and help healing themselves, because I noticed with a lot of patients, they give their power away.
Yes.
To doctors. You experience that, I'm sure, as a chiropractic physician. They want someone to come in and heal them, because a lot of the times, a lot of these diagnoses, these odd symptoms that come from childhood trauma or unresolved trauma. I don't like using trauma so much, because people come in and they say to me, I've got this really bad anxiety disorder, but my parents were great, they did all this. But it depends on what level of sensitivity you are. If you're very sensitive and you don't get quite the attachment, you're going to wind up with diagnoses. So and then they wind up looking to me or to you or whatever as this kind of omnipotent figure that they didn't have in childhood to fix them. And then when you give your power away like that, and I think you're going to talk about this at the very end about the ABCs of how to sort of pull this all around. When you give your power away like that, you just get sicker.
Yeah. And you raise a really good point, Russ. It's this concept that I would see patients, it's kind of like, and let me know if you're watching, if you can resonate with this. There was this feeling and this sense that the guy or the woman in this white coat, and I know people like this, that they go and they want this diagnosis. They want to know what's wrong. They want to know what it is, so that all of a sudden they get this label, and they have this label, and this label becomes this stamp, and they hold on to it like it's their identity. And there's oftentimes this feeling of, oh, thank God I know what's wrong with me. Now I have something to explain these symptoms, which there is value in that, in the diagnosis, especially when we're dealing with like you have a kidney stone, you have a gallstone, you have a bacterial infection. You can actually find out physically what's going on so that we can, take precautions and solve this. The problem happens when we have these chronic issues and psychiatric issues and every chronic illness. And what you're saying here is that you haven't really seen too many chronic issues that aren't really just an adaptation to an unresolved trauma in the body. Is that correct? And so there's a danger in identifying yourself with that label. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, because it makes you a victim, right? It makes you a victim. Like if you have, like you said, like kidney stones or gallstones, like the more we can identify what's causing your pain, the better we can go in there and fix it. If you have, kidney stones, we give you lithotripsy. If you have gallstones, we take your gallbladder out. It makes sense. But, when I see people with childhood trauma or unresolved emotional issues that are causing illness, often the symptoms are all over the place. I get this headache behind my right eye when I pee, my teeth are itchy, like a lot and I'm not putting people down. I'm just saying that when I see something as physician, I'm a pattern recognizer. And if you come in with something that doesn't have a distinguished pattern to it or a specific pattern, I start wondering, is this coming from unresolved trauma? Yeah. And if that's the case, and then we start giving you a label, oh, you have this, and giving you medications, let's see if this works.
Yeah.
We get into a real problem.
There's no healing in that. And things like, trauma is very common when you get into a car accident. Yesterday, I saw a patient, he's a cop, and he had to do a homicide. He did an interview with a man who admitted to homicide. And so that, boom, set off his post-traumatic stress disorder. So now for the last 2 years, he's been dealing with PTSD. And if you have PTSD and you've been diagnosed with that label, boom, you walk around and you keep saying, hi, my name is Jim and I have PTSD. I have PTSD. You wake up and you keep reaffirming, I have, it becomes your identity, which we're gonna go into a little bit. If you actually want healing, then you must transcend that label and start to inquire and question whether or not that label is actually true. Because as you and I were talking, and you had mentioned earlier that sometimes when you have had a conflict with your primary caregivers, getting that label, getting that diagnosis, or the only times when you were getting any attention as a child was when you were sick, now you have this unconscious strategy to stay stuck on that label. Have you ever seen that in your practice?
Only about 1 million times. Like, that is so common. You know, in families that are dysfunctional, where the love doesn't flow freely, often there's a lot of withholding. And sometimes the way to get love, your perception of love from your parents or from your siblings or whatever, is when you were sick. Or sometimes the only time you did get attention was when you were sick. So you throw in dysfunctional family dynamics with attention from being sick, and there is this unconscious drive to become sick, and there's an unconscious drive, maybe what's worse, to stay sick.
Yes.
Because then you get the attention.
Totally. And now here's the thing. A lot of times when I would, and is it true? I mean, I don't want to be rude or anything here, but I'm going to abandon the whole politically correct thing, because that's why I left.
That's what you're like, Nima. Shoot from the hip. Let's hear it.
Here we go. Could you tell when you were seeing clients or patients coming in, and was there a part of you that could tell from just their energy, or, you know, thousands of patient cases, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of tell the ones that are, that there's an alternative unconscious motive to stay sick, can't you?
Yeah, and often those are the ones that are very clingy, you know, and not clingy in a physical sense, but they're like, oh, what can I do? Can I do this? Or, you know, how are you today, doctor? How are you? You know, what's going on with you? Like, they're very set on outside of them. They're trying to get attention from the outside.
Trying to please the doctor and put. Is it true then that there's a transference then of the primary caregiver to the doctor? Can you talk a little bit about that? What
Absolutely.
You noticed there too?
Yeah, I mean, I've often said people with chronic illness, sometimes that we can't find any specific thing wrong with them. Often they're just replacing the parent who wasn't there with the doctor who is there. And the whiter the coat, the more authoritative the physician appears, the more reassured that the patient is taken care of. But it's fostering an old dynamic that is not helpful for that patient, because what we do in medicine typically is we take the onus away from you as the patient, and we say, look, we'll give you this medication, do this. I mean, we say eat right, get exercise, all that kind of stuff.
That's just lip service.
But we kind of know you're not going to do it anyway, right? So that's probably part of it. I mean, the number of times I've had people say, you know, can you just give me a pill? You know, which is what doctors get, you know, blasted for all the time, is like, all you are is pill pushers. All you are is pill pushers. And then, you know, 5 out of my, 25 patients for the day are asking me for pills. So it's kind of like, we're trying to make bad guys out of a situation, when really what we need to do is empower the people that have this diagnosis and really question, like, is this diagnosis accurate? And typically what doctors will do, if you come in with a certain type of cancer or a certain type of, rheumatoid condition, will give you the treatment that 70% of the people respond to, which means that 30%, like almost a third, we're giving you treatment that probably isn't going to help you too much. But because we're always playing numbers, and that's what we do in medicine, we play numbers as best we can. We're always sort of hedging our bets. maybe that medicine isn't great for you. So that's the time for you to kind of decide, is this really the right treatment for me? Can I seek some alternative advice and see what happens? Which is often a whole big can of worms, because as you and I know, the doctors and the chiropractors they're like the sharks and the jets. We don't really get along that well. So it's I wish there was this thing that alternative medicine and allopathic medicine would get along, but I don't think we're ever going to see it, just because the doctors, the medical doctors, we get intimidated by stuff that we see as working, like chiropractic, naturopath, that kind of stuff that we don't know anything about.
Yeah.
Right. So our natural response is to go, that's witchcraft, that's this, that's it. And when we're seeing all these positive results that people are getting from alternative, healing, then we're starting to get a little creeped out a little bit, because we're going, okay, well, we don't know anything about this, and it seems to be helping. So my point in all of this is to say, doctors are great, but we're advisors. We're not parents.
Yes.
So that's the way to look at doctors, is we're advisors.
Yeah. Beautiful.
We're teachers.
Dr. Russ, thank you so much. Stick around. We might call on you a little bit later. We're gonna get Kim on and share.
Hey, I'm around for about another 20 minutes, bud.
All right, brother. Thank you. So that was pretty profound when you think about it. Is the question, am I going to medical doctors? Am I going to these practitioners as a replacement for an attachment wound that's unresolved from a parent? And I could see this happening again and again and again. I mean, there's a transference that can often happen. And if you're finding yourself really married to a diagnosis, be open to the possibility that there's an unconscious drive going on. And this isn't a blame game. This isn't a shame game. This is just an awakening game, because all I'm concerned about is healing. And by being stuck on a story, on a label, and on an identity, without going outside of the model that created that word anyway, especially for psychiatric disorders, bipolar, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline person, all of these disorders are actually, especially the PTSD, are the psychosomatic, psychiatric conditions that are diagnosed by your medical doctor, by your GP. These are all simply responses to trauma. And which is 100% true, it's 100% verified in research. And if that's true, which it is, then the approach to healing must change. And so that was what I've spent 18 years working on, creating an approach, because doctors will say, you got to eat right, you got to manage your stress. But the question is how? That's just lip service. I had made some discoveries in my recoveries, and I wanted to know exactly how. What are the steps? And we're going to be sharing that with you. So to go over a little bit of what's possible, I want to introduce somebody very near and dear to my heart. She happens to be one of my first clients when I left the confines of my chiropractic practice. She reached out to me, and she was dealing with generalized anxiety disorder, and basically a prisoner in her own bedroom, and in her own mind. And it was a long-standing diagnosis, and she was listening to some of the content on social media, part of a group that I was in. Not only did I piss her off, but she also was intrigued by some of the things that I was sharing, even though it was quite triggering. That's what I do. I like to trigger people. It's just what I do. That's why I call it trigger proof. Kim, welcome.
Hi.
Kim, why don't you share with us where you're from, and when did you get your diagnosis? What was happening, and how did they manage you at the time?
I'm from New Jersey. My diagnosis started early on. I got married at 18, and by the time I was 25, I had 3 kids, all 6 and under. And over those first few years, I was suffering what I didn't know what it was, but they were panic attacks. And I would go to my doctor, and I was sure I was dying of a heart attack, and I would eventually be told, there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head, go home. And this went on over a period of time, just sporadic. And then eventually I had my 3 kids. One was an infant. And I started having panic attacks every single day, multiple times throughout the day. And along with that, through all that time, underlying everything, I was suffering from anxiety. I was constantly worrying and nervous and afraid. So I got to the point where I was asking my 6-year-old to look over my infant while I ran into the bathroom to get a cold shower to try to snap myself out of whatever was wrong with me. Because no one had ever told me. They just said it's all in your head, which is a tough thing to hear. So I went to a local doctor. We were living in a small town. He was a young doctor and newer and had done some research and said, I think you're having panic attacks. And he said, this medication I think will help you. Let's give it a try. And of course I was like, okay, sure.
Whatever.
Definitely. So I took the medication home and eventually I took it and it did help relieve some of the panic attack symptoms I was having.
So you were amped up constantly.
Yes.
And you were low, and then it just kind of brought your emotions kind of like this, didn't it?
Right. And for me, I thought, okay, now I can manage my life. I can get back to taking care of the kids and I don't have to worry so much. So I was willing to accept life is manageable now. I love my kids, I love being a mom. We had a very happy life, but on the inside, I wasn't satisfied with my life. This wasn't the life I really wanted as far as the way I felt personally. But I was willing to accept that because I thought that was it. That was the only answer for me. And by the way, the doctor didn't mention to me that it was an antidepressant that I was being put on. I didn't know what that was. It was my dad, when I told him about it, he asked someone else and he said, do you know you're on an antidepressant? And I said, no, I'm not. I don't have depression. He said, you're on an antidepressant. And that was the beginning of my journey on those pills.
On those pills. So how long were you on those pills before you reached out to me?
25 years.
25 years with the diagnosis, repeating to yourself, I have anxiety, I have anxiety, I have panic attacks. At its worst, what was it like for you? And I just want to kind of like the psychology of it. What was it like for you, Kim, to consistently be told again and again, well, you have anxiety, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick, and you're like reaffirming that I'm sick for 25 years?
It was difficult. There were 2 things. First, I felt relief at first. I thought, oh, okay, now I know what's wrong, It's not all in my head, although on the other hand, I thought, but it is all in my head. There's something wrong with it. I'm a mental case. And the other thing, but then there was a stigma. You're mentally ill. And I actually had people who were my relatives and friends make fun of me because I had a mental illness. They made fun of my anxiety. I couldn't control it. So my life then became hiding the fact that I had this.
You're right. Now you have shame. Now you're dealing with shame because of the
totally
stigma.
Embarrassed.
You don't want to be made fun of.
So then I became a liar. Because then I have to lie to cover up that I'm struggling.
Wow.
So living that way all of my life, I kept, my sisters and I kind of joke about it. If we all wore t-shirts, mine would say, I'm the mental case. My other sister would say, I'm the nurse and she has all these degrees. And my other sister, I'm a teacher and she has all these degrees, and we used to joke about it.
Case.
And I'm the mental case.
What a great affirmation.
You totally.
Great.
You gotta laugh.
Good job.
So eventually though.
What was that? It must have kept building up and then you hit this, what was your rock bottom like?
It did. The issue that I had with antidepressants, they made life manageable, but then eventually my body got used to them and I had to go on a new one. And that's a really difficult process to have to switch medications.
Yeah.
So after 25 years, I ran out of medications that were working for me.
Right.
And I noticed over a 2-year period an increase in anxiety it would come on and it was so severe that it's really scared me. And I would push myself, and I've described this before, it's like pushing a boulder up a mountain just to get through the day. So for 2 years that would come and go, and then eventually it didn't go away. So I realized when I started calling out of work and making excuses, I had to quit work because I couldn't do that to people.
And you lost connection with, the events of your children's lives as well. That was probably
I couldn't do anything because here's what it felt like. Before my eyes were open and I woke up, my heart was racing, I was sweating, I was shaking, and I felt terrified, but I didn't know what I was afraid of. And unless I was sleeping, that's how I felt. And people asked me to describe, well, what does that mean? And the only thing I can say to describe it is if you're deathly afraid of spiders and you know that moment there's a spider and that the adrenaline and fear run through you and you have that, that was what I lived like all the time.
All the time. And so in that space, you probably like easily triggered too. Like you couldn't take feedback, like things would just trigger you easily when you're in that space, when you're dysregulated.
Very, I would struggle because someone would say, hey, my youngest would want to go to the park, and they would say, don't you want to go to the park with him?
Right.
And I would think, of course I want to go to the park with him. I can't leave the house. I'm terrified.
Right.
So definitely.
So something in you got that point and you're like, okay, something's got to change. I can't do this anymore. What is it that in, what I said that you were like, all right, I got to try this?
I had given up hope before I met you because I thought I tried everything. And then I found out my daughter was having a baby. And, sometimes there's these wake-up calls and it's kind of like, I've missed so many things, like with that daughter and with my other kids that were heart-wrenching. It's either I do something else or I'm not sure why I'm alive.
Right.
So I came across you, didn't like you at all. I just thought,
hey, come on, what's not to like, Kim?
What a jerk. Doesn't know how to talk to people.
Little rough around the edges, okay? I'm a work in progress.
The rose emoji was the worst. I was triggered by that. I'm like, what is the rose emoji? So that doesn't help. So
what she's referring to is like in this group that we were a part of, and I would contribute as kind of like the emotions contributor, stress and emotions. I would say something that was a little bit harsh, but then I would put a rose emoji next to it just to kind of buffer it. And that really pissed her off.
It didn't buffer it. So, I had read, I am not a neuroscientist, but I know one. And I had read a couple years ago about something called neuroplasticity. A couple years before I met you. And I remember thinking, man, that sounds like it could help me, but how do I do that? So when I started hearing you talking about your method and what you do, I was thinking, wow, that sounds like that. But then I would have to talk to him if I want to find out more. So I basically had to swallow my pride, get over it. And I had to look at my life and think, all right, I've been living this mundane, manageable life, and I'm desperate to have this really great life. And I've given up so many things and given up so much time with my kids that I know that's hurt them. I don't get a do-over. I don't get a do-over with some of those things.
Yeah.
So I have to let all that go, and I've got to talk to that guy and see what he's got to say. And so we talked, and I thought, man, I have no money. I haven't been working, but I'm worth it. My kids are worth it. I'm going to do whatever it takes to see if this works for me.
Beautiful. And I remember that day. I remember exactly where I was. It was in my office in Maple Ridge. And I was kind of like weaning off of my full-time chiropractic practice. And we did our overview session. I took you through my overview method, in which we went through a past trauma that you were holding on to, guilt and shame and confusion about. And what did you notice happen after our very first session that you experienced that? Because you'd gone to psychologists, counselors, therapists, hypnotherapy, you've literally tried everything. And
Right.
What happened after we shifted those perceptions and kind of resolved that trauma then?
I really didn't think anything was going to happen. I was, very skeptical, but after we talked, I thought, I feel different. I feel different. I knew I felt completely different about that issue, that past trauma. And I noticed the rest of the day, the next few days, something changed. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something changed in me. And before, when we started talking, I was home in my home, not leaving. And suddenly I was waking up not as afraid, not with so many of the physical symptoms I had been experiencing. I still had some. And I was starting to think, I think I might want to leave the house. I might want to go out and do something. And that's what I was noticing over the next few days. It was like this little process that was taking place that I was noticing was happening, but I didn't really quite get it. Didn't understand what was going on with me.
And so fast forward to today, what's different in your life today? Like over the last few months, what have you experienced that has been completely different? Now fast forward, months, years later after this process, you now are, I'm just gonna say it right now, Kim is now the manager of our entire community online. She works for us in our company, and is now sharing her story with people all over the world, and kind of an accountability coach and a community manager for other people dealing with similar challenges. So what have you noticed that's been totally different from that moment you had the diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder to today?
My life is completely different. I tell people I had the same heart, the same loving heart. I had the same mind, but my mind works for me now, where in the past it didn't. And I feel free. It's life didn't just become perfect suddenly because I got over things from the past and I went off medication. But I gained a freedom that I never knew existed.
And you now get on planes and travel to different parts of the world and help people through some really challenging, shitty things because of what you've learned.
I'm amazed. Every time I talk to someone from another part of the world, I feel in awe of what's happening. And I'm looking at them and they're sharing my story with them, and they want to hear a little bit about me. And that was my hope, that if I could get through this, I remember praying, if I could get a miracle and I could get over this, I will help other people. I want to help other people. And so when I am able to have those conversations with people and offer someone some hope and let them know, yes, it is possible to heal, I'm in awe that I'm living this life. And getting on a plane and going to Europe, I didn't think it was in my dreams, yes, but I thought that will never happen. And then it happened suddenly. And the funniest part was, as we were going by the ocean, I was saying, why do you guys call it the sea? That's so weird. Like where we live, it's called the ocean. And you pointed out to me, that's the Mediterranean Sea. And I just remember thinking, I'm seeing something that I've never seen before. I never thought I would see. I'm seeing this big, beautiful world of ours.
Kim, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story, for being such a great guide to others and a friend to me. We've become this sarcastic, this sarcastic friendship that's really been a breath of fresh air for me, especially over the last couple of years. And thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story, and then also showing others what's possible, that you have a diagnosis, but you don't have to allow that diagnosis to identify who you are and define who you are, and be an example to others.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nima.
Thank you, my dear.
Bye.
Dr. Russ, sorry, I just wanted you to chime in right here, because it's pretty valuable information. Would you see, with the modern medical establishment, after a diagnosis like that, for that long, any resolution of removing medications, was that common for you as a medical doctor, of somebody who had a diagnosis and no longer had a diagnosis like that anymore within the medical system?
Yeah, I think it would really be dependent on the patient, like whether or not they they would drive to say, look, I don't want to be on this medication anymore. I want to sort of pursue something else. If someone's had like, mental illness for, a diagnosed mental illness for 20 plus years or so, generally the medical profession will kind of just, if they're doing okay, kind of keep going with their medications and that kind of thing too. I did have patients that came in and said, look, I'd like to get off this stuff. And I would say, look, well, you have to start taking responsibility for yourself and start doing the things that you need to do to move off medication. So I had quite a few people want to get off medication, but after about 20 or 25 years, I think both the physician and the patient kind of just get resigned to it and just continue on and just keep fulfilling the
old pattern.
So, and it's just trying, and I don't want to get down on doctors, because I think we definitely have a role here. But I think that what I'd really like to get across in this particular episode of Trigger Proof is that take responsibility for your diagnosis and don't depend so much on physicians, because they'll just do what they do. I mean, we rely on medications. That's how we're trained. So, you don't want to go to a hardware store looking for peanut butter. That's not what you're going to find there.
So good.
Right? So if you're going to go to doctors, that's probably what you're going to get. Now, that said, make sure that you're aware that you're probably going to get a medication and say, do I need to take this? By all means, try it if you feel comfortable with it. I have tons of patients that I used to prescribe antidepressants to who never touched it, never even filled the prescription. So, it's just staying open to everything, and you being kind of taking control of your own health care is really what it comes down to, because once you give that control away to a doctor, you'll probably get sicker for whatever reason. So that's what I would say is, like, doctors, we have a really great role in a lot of things. We help a lot of people. We do a lot of things really, really well. But we're dependent on pharma. That's how we're trained. So don't go to the hardware store looking for peanut butter.
And on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Russ. We'll see you very soon.
Okay, bud.
Bye-bye. There you have it. Now, do the work. You're going to hear this all the time. Do the work and take responsibility. You might be asking, okay, so how do I take responsibility? This is a methodology and a model that I put together not only from my own knowledge base, but also from my own experience in going through anxiety, the transitional anxiety, relationship limbo. Should I stay? Should I go? All of these challenges that I've gone through, I've put together a model of how to transcend them. And it just so happens to fall exactly as a singularity model for any other diagnosis that you've had, whether you've had cancer, whether you have heart disease, whether you have depression, anything, even if you have schizophrenia. This model is not a treatment for any diagnosis. Let me repeat that again. Let me say that again. This model of what we're doing is not a treatment for any diagnosis, much in the same way that you don't exercise as a treatment for diabetes, because exercise is not the treatment for diabetes, it's actually an active, engaged activity that you do to lower the symptoms, to cure the root cause. So this is really about removing toxicity and replacing what's deficient. So this is it. It's about toxicity and deficiency. So I really want you to understand this. If you've been diagnosed, or even if you haven't and you want to prevent a diagnosis, don't wait for a diagnosis to do the important work of taking responsibility. And at the end of the day, with all of the studies and the training and the neuroscience and the personal development work and the chiropractic degree and the Bachelor of Human Kinetics, all of that, I've come up with what I call the intimacy upgrade, because it just so happens that the root cause of the root cause of the root cause of the root cause of all the stress happens to be how I am relating to myself, how I'm relating to other people. That level of intimacy, my ability to see myself and to know myself and to be able to see and know another. And so it's a program, it's a process that I put together, and that's how Kim got her results. And this is how we help people, whether they have skin problems, whether they have digestive issues, whether they have cancer even. We put them through the exact same process. And here's what it is, and you've heard me talk about this before. The number one part of it is to regulate your nervous system. If you have a amped up nervous system, you're in alert and alarm all the time, your brain isn't working, you can't learn anything. You are not taking in nutrients properly. If you're starting to have more green smoothies, well, guess what? Your nervous system is dysregulated. Your digestion's not going to process and assimilate all of those nutrients properly. It's in alarm and alert. So you must learn how to regulate the nervous system, starting from the breath all the way to living every day according to your highest values. This is a conscious effort, and it's something that you must learn to do, and it's a regular practice. You must also, as Kim shared, you must clear your past resentments. And this is what we use the overview method for, and this is what we do our live trainings all over the world. September in Vancouver, October in Australia, November in Barcelona, and December in Dubai. I'm traveling so I can teach people the fundamentals of clearing your past trauma from the cognitive approach to a body-based approach, because it's not just a mental cognitive journey. By clearing the past resentments, when I took Kim through a past trauma and we reframed it and recontextualized it, not only in her mind but also in her body, all of a sudden this weight lifted. And you can see when she was describing her experience as something weird, everything felt different. What happens is when you clear your past resentment, it participates in regulating your nervous system. The state of alarm goes down, you feel safer in your body, and when you get these both right, you feel a sense of presence. What she was saying, something felt different. If you're always in your head, in the past, or fear of the future, being present feels freaking different. Believe me, it feels totally different to be aware and present in the moment if you're constantly in your head, in the past, or in the future. But when you regulate your nervous system and you clear your past resentments, you're in the present moment. And the next part is the work in progress, is the dancing with your dark passenger. Now, this isn't just kind of like a program that's like a pill overnight. These are tools. These are tools that you must learn, that you must practice, like a yoga practice, like a spiritual practice, like practicing your golf swing. It's something to master. And I'm here to try to encourage you to up the level of relevance and importance of mastering this. Because if you don't get that part right, those little voices in your head, that inner critic, start to drive the bus. Kim was sharing, she was the difference is that she's a lot nicer to herself than she used to be. And that's the end result. Once you learn how to dance with your dark passenger, you become more understanding towards yourself and empathetic towards yourself. Rather than judging, abandoning, blaming, and shaming yourself, which is what we normally do when we're holding on to unresolved trauma and interpreting it as we are not good enough. And so when you have learned how to dance with your own dark passenger, your inner critic, and you've learned how to reparent your wounded inner child, all of a sudden you have a sense of understanding. And when you've done that with clearing your past resentments, you have an understanding of yourself and the other people who were involved in the trauma, in the abuse, in the neglect, in the abandonment. You don't take it on, you don't take it so personally, and you have a sense of freedom, as Kim was mentioning. And the next part is, if you want to upgrade your intimacy to completely transform your relationships with other people, you must learn empathic communication. Now, I'm here to admit that that was not something that was my forte. In fact, I was completely blocked from empathy, which was passed down from my caregivers, because they were stuck in, they had no knowledge of the work as well. It wasn't because they're bad people. Empathy is something that can be taught, can be learned, and it's a lack of empathy for myself that causes me to have a lack of empathy towards you. And so empathic communication is critical, but a conscious empathy, not a codependent type of empathy like you would hear, I'm an empath. Oh, I'm an empath. That's usually an unconscious empathy that's caused by unresolved trauma, where you have to take care of everybody else's needs and abandon your own. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about conscious empathy, where you have resourced yourself first and then you're able to resource another. And the last part is, this is how Kim completely transformed, and we were there as a community helping her. I remember the day, it was maybe a year or two ago, where she took a photo of her last pill that she took. It was a half. And she said, today is the last day that I'm taking pills. And when she took her last pill and she was weaning off, it wasn't easy. It was not an easy thing. So there was several times where she reached out to me as her coach and she's like, I'm going back on them. Everybody's telling me to. And I said, sure, you can go ahead. However, let's go back to this for the next 48 hours because, she got in her head and, stuff happened and she was triggered. I said, all right, you can do that, but can you just give 48 hours of going back into this and let's see what happens. And lo and behold, there was a complete shift and transformation, and she was able to really stay connected and committed to that. And so the last part is community. It all happens because of community. And when you get all of this right, you end up with the holy grail of personal development work that if you don't get to, you're not complete. It is a profound sense of self-love, a big, juicy love affair, falling in love with yourself, not in a cocky way, but in a way of connection, in a way of gratitude and overflow so that you can then contribute to others. You owe it not just to yourself, but you owe it to your children, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your friends, your clients, your team, to be the greatest version of yourself, fully self-loving so that you can then give to others. And so the last thing that I wanted to share with you before we set off is, let's say you're diagnosed with something, what are you going to do? You've just been diagnosed, what are you going to do? And we have a couple minutes left, and I want you to just really take this, other than, really taking this to heart and really just studying this and asking questions, send a DM if you have any questions about any of this. You want to really have an intimacy audit and see where you stand with this and a strategy to solve this. Definitely reach out. You are not alone. You don't have to do it alone. In fact, it is critical for you to realize that you're here for a very short period of time, and every week or month that you delay in self-regulation and co-regulation, you are losing out on healing. And so once you've been diagnosed, and if you truly want to heal, Russ and I put together an ABC kind of checklist that I'm going to encourage you to go through so that you can then have a result, so that in 3 months from now, you have a completely different result. So here it is. Number 1, awareness. You have a diagnosis. You've been diagnosed bipolar. You've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. You've been rheumatoid arthritis, you can clearly see. There's a test, there's a blood test, boom, you have it. But generalized anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, all of these things that you can then go, yes, I have that, I have all those things. There are labels that are often used to help sell medication to you. Ask yourself the question, is it really true? Get very curious and inquire. Don't just, boom, say, oh, I've been diagnosed. I have a friend who came to me and said, I was diagnosed celiac. And she literally repeated it so much that she completely believed it to be true, not really knowing that you are unable to diagnose celiac conclusively unless you've had a biopsy of the lining of your stomach, so that you can actually see the microvilli destroyed. And only then can we make a conclusive diagnosis. But she was like one of those people that I was talking about earlier, so stuck on the diagnosis, so stuck on that label that she kept repeating it again and again and again. And when I met her, that's what she said. And then we went through a process, and very shortly after that, she was able to eat gluten and went on trips to Europe and traveled all over, ate gluten and dairy for a long period of time, was now able to see that that diagnosis was not necessarily hers. And so she was noticing that there was quite a bit of correlation between her emotional state and the way that her body processed food. So once again, this entire thing becomes relevant if you want to heal. And it's a work in progress. It's kind of like exercise. It's a work in progress. So if you put the tool away, then you're going to kind of drift back into unconsciousness. This, my friend, is consciousness work. So awareness. So first thing I want you to get is question it. And I want you to write this down and repeat this affirmation. Whether you have, especially if you have fibromyalgia or Lyme's disease or all of these weird type of symptoms that go all over the place, I really want you to write this down. My diagnosis is not my identity. And awareness of understanding, this is one of the things that Valerie said in one of the overview experience seminars, was her mother was very detached from her, disconnected. Same with my friend who had gluten sensitivity, complete gluten diagnosis, who diagnosed herself celiac or was diagnosed by a medical doctor. In those cases, the mother or the caregiver was so disconnected and not attuned. In my other friend's case, a mother was alcoholic, drug addict, all of that stuff. The only time that she would feel love and connection from parents was when she got sick. The only time that Valerie felt connected to her mother was when she had a migraine. So awareness is also the understanding that do I have something unconscious to gain? What sympathy am I getting? In other words, what are the benefits? And this is going to be very difficult because your ego, that dark passenger, is going to want to hide that. It's not going to want to let you know about it. It's going to want to keep it under wraps. And this is a big revelation for so many people. One of the questions that I like to ask in the overview experience when we're seeing clients, we say, having this diagnosis and having this health problem, what feelings is it helping you have to avoid feeling? Let me repeat that. This diagnosis that you have, what feelings do you get to avoid feeling because of this diagnosis? And one of my clients who had MS, she says, since my diagnosis of MS, I don't feel any rejection. I got so much love for my mother. She comes and helps out. Everybody's just so loving towards me. And it's kind of like, if this illness is an unconscious strategy to have love and to have sympathy, then why on earth would I want to get rid of it? Now, I know that what I'm saying is quite shocking to many people, and it might trigger the hell out of you. And I get that. And that's why not everybody's ready to heal. And this is what I realized. And so especially if you're frustrated, if you're feeling frustrated about a parent or a relative or a friend who's stuck on a diagnosis and stuck on a label, send them or tag them in this episode for sure. But the way that you can help is by realizing that sometimes they don't want to heal, that they have an unconscious strategy for staying sick that they're not consciously aware of, but it's there. And that's their unconscious strategy of getting love, of getting attention, of getting approval, because it's a transference of an old wound from childhood. So they're very married to that label. They're married to that diagnosis. In fact, watching an episode like this and meeting someone like me would probably piss them off. Those types of people in my audience literally get up and they walk away. I could spot them right away because they literally can't handle hearing what I'm saying because it's so offensive to them. It triggers them so much, and you can usually tell. I was kind of shocked at first when it would happen, but it would happen again and again and again. I was like, I know what's going on. There's an unconscious strategy. They don't want to face it, and that label has become their identity, and it's their unconscious strategy for getting love and approval and attention. So unless the person has other strategies for getting those things, they're going to be stuck on that label, and not everyone is meant to be healthy. And that was a big release when I realized that. It wasn't an easy revelation for me, but I got it. And now we only work with the people that are 100% ready. In fact, we can clear post-traumatic stress disorder very, very readily compared to what the medical system does. But I always look at the client and I say, I just want to warn you, this identity and this label that you've had, that you've been holding on to for a very long time, quite often, once we remove that label, those benefits that you're getting, those side benefits that you're getting from having this illness is not going to be there anymore, whether it's a disability check, you don't want to lose that, so you'd rather keep the illness, or whether it is attention, approval, no more rejection, you're going to have to confront those feelings. Which one do you want? Is the misery of you living with these symptoms worse than the fear of going into the unknown without all of these crutches of the known? You have to make that decision. So the only people that we work with are the ones ready to go into the unknown and to heal, because they have a bigger vision for their lives. They want to make more connection with their family. So awareness is the first one. And I know that what I'm saying might be conflicting to many of you. Number 2 is B, is to get into your body. Oftentimes what I've noticed and observed is that these aches and pains and chronic pains happen because you've been detached from your body. You're in your head all the time. So it's going to take a self-regulation practice, often nervous system attunement regulation that we do with our clients, to get you reconnected with your body and make it a regular practice. And sometimes that's going to be painful because you've been so used to numbing yourself from the body, that you're so dissociated from the body, that getting reconnected might be challenging, but it's a necessary thing to heal. You must feel it in order to heal it. And number 3, C, control. You must take control. You must take responsibility by educating yourself. Do not just go, as Dr. Russ said, by what the doctor has said. Find out and seek out a team of practitioners who are going to work with you and be the quarterback. Become your own best advocate. Talk to people, do research, educate yourself, watch content like this, reach out, ask questions, join a program that you're actually learning how to self-heal. Because the word doctor actually means teacher. And I committed myself to teaching my entire tribe and community how to heal yourself. So you must get a team and educate yourself rather than just blindly accepting treatments. And that's the question you want to ask yourself. How can I take care of myself? This is what this entire program, Trigger Proof, is all about. It's about self-regulation so that you can transform your relationships with other people, with your business, with your prosperity, by completely transforming the relationship with yourself. I'm looking at some of these questions here and participation. It's good to have you guys on. Hopefully this was relevant for you. And once again, every week, join us 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and that's 9 p.m. around in Spain, Barcelona, 8 in the UK on Wednesdays, and early morning on Thursdays in Australia and New Zealand. We'd love to have you jump on live, or if you're catching the replay, thank you for being here. I'm going to leave with a little poem that I wrote. The power to heal lies directly in your hands. Cells, spine, and soul must awaken from the trance, popping the meds and taking a chance, trying to find an answer in this insurance dance. The pills and the potions are becoming a joke, leave you stuck, disempowered, and headed for broke. Even if you are one of them skeptical folks, the diagnosis isn't who you are, folks. The diagnosis isn't who you are, folks. See you at the next perfect time.